everyone. I'm Billy.
And I'm Kamraun. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors and the creators of the Malazan Brotherhood.
Today we will be discussing Book 3, Chapter 13 of Deadhouse Gates, a novel in the Malazan Books of the Fallen. This is part 1 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is most definitely not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Both Billy and I know this to be the best fantasy story ever written and want to share our love of the series with you.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We'll try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the book, but sometimes I kind of let some things slip, and I've been really good this book. I've only dropped one thing once, so I have just a minor apology, but I'm not really just too sorry yet.
A quick warning, today's episode contains some deserved and undeserved acts of violence. Listener discretion is advised.
It's very true. Nice. Our show is listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we would really appreciate that. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we're posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you. Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com. All right, Chapter 13, Part 1. The chapter begins with an excerpt. Quote, "An exquisite match of dog to master, the Wiccan cattle dog is a vicious, unpredictable breed, compact yet powerful, though by far its most notable characteristic is its stubborn will." End quote. And this is from Lives of the Conquered by Ilham Troth. I'll come back to this quote momentarily. We begin the chapter with Duiker, who strode between the large, spacious tents of the Malazan camp. He heard shouts erupt ahead. A moment later, one of the Wiccan dogs appeared as it headed straight for him. Duiker fumbled for his sword, already knowing it was too late. At the last instant, the huge animal dodged lithely around him, and he saw that it held a terrified lapdog in its mouth. The cattle dog ran on and disappeared from sight between two tents. The quote at the beginning of the chapter said the Wiccan cattle dog was compact yet powerful. The dog that just passed Duiker was described as huge. What is used as a comparison to determine the dogs are compact? A hound of shadow?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. You've seen a Mastiff, right?
Not in person. I've seen pictures of them.
Okay. Have I told you this before? My uncle had a Mastiff. He had cattle. My dad is 6'7", and there's a picture of this dog with his paws on my dad's shoulder, and he's looking down into my father's face.
He's standing on his hind legs?
On his hind legs, while my dad is standing up. And this guy's face is looking down, not like a little bit, like he's a head taller than my dad with that slope to his body. If he could stand straight up, he'd have been taller. I've kind of always imagined that's what a hound of shadows like, something like that. He's a wee bit smaller than a mule, because they talk about the hounds of shadows being like the size of a mule. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of confused by that. Yeah, especially the introduction. I would have imagined a smaller dog. I'd imagine this is a huge dog, especially compared to his reaction.
Mm-hmm.
He's going for the sword knowing it's already too late because there's some bad news. But it's like, okay, maybe it's just one of the rare big ones, super big ones.
I think that Mastiff that you're describing, your uncle's Mastiff, makes sense that that's the kind of size that you'd expect these animals to be, especially if you've seen any of the cattle breeds that come from around the Mongolian. They have some pretty big dogs up there that they'll use. I think they're mainly horses. I don't know. They have yaks, I think.
Yeah, they got some yaks.
Or that musk ox.
Yeah, they're big animals, though.
The dogs are definitely a large breed, for sure.
And my uncle did have cattle. So maybe that's what the dog is supposed to be like that kind of size of a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And no kidding, I would wet my pants too if I saw that fella coming at me, what I thought with some intention in his eyes to end me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The fact that it had that lap dog in its mouth, that's pretty funny too.
Yeah.
I appreciate the beginning of these events.
Nicely stated, sir.
Ahead of Duiker, a number of figures appeared, armed with large rocks and, bizarrely, Connie's parasols. They were dressed as if about to attend a royal function, although Duiker saw raw fury in their expressions. One yelled, "You there, old man! Did you see a mad hound just now?" Duiker quietly said, "I saw a running cattle dog, aye." The man asked, "With a rare Hengese roach dog in its mouth?" Duiker thought, "A dog that eats cockroaches?" He asked, rare? I assumed it was raw. It's a nice bit of banter there.
Yes.
The nobles grew quiet as their gazes focused on Duiker. The man growled, a foolish time for humor, old man. He was younger than the others, his honey-colored skin and large eyes denoting his Quantalian lineage. He was lean, with the physical assurance of a duelist, the identification confirmed by the basket-hilted rapier at his belt. There was something in the man's eyes that suggested to Duiker that here was someone who enjoyed killing. The man approached, his walk becoming a swagger. He said, an apology, peasant, though I'll grant it won't save you from a beating. At least you'll stay breathing. A horseman approached from behind at a canter. Duiker saw the duelist's eyes dart over his shoulder. Corporal List reined in, ignoring the nobleman. He said, my apologies, sir. I was delayed at the smithy. Where's your horse? Duiker said, with the main herd. A day off for the poor beast. Long overdue. For a young man of low rank, List managed an impressive expression of cold regard as he finally looked down at the nobleman. He said, if we arrive late, sir, Coltane will demand an explanation. Duiker addressed the nobleman and asked, are we done here? The man gave a curt nod and said, for now. I'm getting flashes of turban ore here.
Very much so. Even during the run and retreat, this Joker still wants to duel. I'm ready to see some fellow like this catch an arrow in the throat.
He'll never be close to any of that type of activity.
I know it.
Erikson does a good job, as we'll see later, writing these imperious nobles.
Yes, he does.
The caricature of them.
He does a great job. They do get my ire. Mostly, this was even worse than Ore because of the fact of what they're doing while they're doing this running retreat. You know, it's like, I understand if you have this time in a big city because you got nothing else to do, but, you know, you fellas really seriously.
Grasping at straws, scraps of power.
Yeah. It's like, just stay alive. Come on, help.
On that last point, I can imagine that to the nobles, they expect everyone to lay down a carpet of blood for them and deliver them wherever they're going. That is the expectation.
That is. You're right about that. And sadly enough, in a weird way, Coltane letting them maintain a lot of their heirs while on the run has not helped. He should have let these people suffer a little bit more to realize what, maybe appreciate what they've got.
We did talk about why he might be letting that happen a while ago. And I think there's got to be some rules that he's following.
Yeah. I'm assuming that if he's treating anyone badly, and this gets back to the Empress, if anyone survives, it could be bad for him in some way or another, or somebody close to him.
Escorted by Corporal List, Duiker resumed his journey through the nobles' camp. When they had gone a dozen paces, List leaned over his saddle and said, Alar looked ready to call you out, historian. Duiker asked, he's known then, Alar? List said, Pulik Alar. Duiker said, how unfortunate for him. List grinned. They came to a central clearing in the encampment and discovered a whipping underway. The short, wide man with the leather cattail in one heat-bloated hand was familiar. The victim was a servant. 3 other servants stood off to one side, their eyes averted. A few other nobleborns stood nearby, gathered around a weeping woman and voicing murmurs of consolation. Lenestro's gold brocaded cloak had lost some of its brilliant sheen, and in his red-faced frenzy as he swung the whip, he looked like a frothing ape. List dryly said, I see the nobles are pleased by the return of their servant folk. Duiker muttered, I suspect this has more to do with a snatched lapdog. In any case, this stops now. List glanced over and said, he'll simply resume it later, sir. Duiker said nothing. List wondered, who would steal a lapdog? As he followed Duiker as he approached Lenestro. Duiker said, who wouldn't? We've water, but we're still hungry. In any case, one of the Wiccan cattle dogs thought it up before the rest of us, to our collective embarrassment. List said, I blame preoccupation, sir. Lenestro noted their approach and paused his whipping, his breath loud as a bellows. Man, this guy is on the verge of collapse.
Yeah, he is. Sounds like it.
Lenestro was the one that used to be overweight, and then he lost weight, but he had like folds of skin now. Is that?
Yes, I think that's so. But he looks like he's whipped himself into a frenzy.
Nice. Duiker ignored Lenestro and went to the servant. The man was old, down on his elbows and knees, hands held protectively behind his head. Red welts rode his knuckles, his neck, and down the length of his bony back. Beneath the ruin were tracks of older scars. A jewel-studded leash with a broken collar lay in the dust beside him. Couple things here. First, I'm reminded of a number of whipping scenes in movies, but the one that really left an impression was in 12 Years a Slave. Have you seen that movie?
No.
Okay. I'll tell you what. It's about a black man who was free, and then he gets kidnapped by some men and sold into slavery. The scene in particular that actually I stopped watching the movie after this because it was so rough to watch. There was like a whipping scene in the movie where the new master was whipping him. Some of the other scenes that come to mind, like Johnny Rico getting whipped in Starship Troopers. I mentioned a movie called RRR where one of the friends has to whip his other friend. He's undercover.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But this scene, I think it had a lot more weight to it because this is the kind of stuff, it's not fiction. This is like actually stuff that happened. And then also just the brutality of how it was happening. I mean, it was so intense. The guy that was holding the whip was so out of breath and he broke the whip. It was terrible. Like just really nasty. So I kind of pick up a little bit of that with Lenestro being fat and red and out of breath. You know, he is out of shape, but at the same time, he was going hard on this guy, you know?
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I read that. Just putting so much effort into this. I'm assuming it's his dog that got stolen, I guess.
And then second, can we assume the dog collar broke as the dog was stolen? Or do you think the collar broke and the dog made the run for it?
I think the collar broke. He felt the call of the wild.
Just took off?
I don't want to say something spoiled.
Yeah.
I'm so close to it. It's so hard not to.
Yeah, I got you. Lenestro snapped, "Not your business, historian." Duiker said, "These servants stood a Tethanzi charge at Sakala. That defense helped to keep your head on your shoulders, Lenestro." Lenestro squealed, "Coltane stole property. The council so judged him. The fine has been issued." List said, "Issued and duly pissed on." Lenestro wheeled on List and raised his whip. Duiker said, "A warning. Striking a soldier of the 7th, or, for that matter, his horse, will see you hung." Lenestro visibly struggled with his temper, his arm still raised, the whip quivering. Others were gathering, their sympathy clearly united with Lenestro. Even so, Duiker did not anticipate violence. The nobles possessed unrealistic notions, but they weren't suicidal. Duiker said, "Corporal, we'll take this man to the 7th's healers." List said, "Yes, sir," as he briskly dismounted. The servant had passed out. Together they carried him to the horse and laid him belly down across the saddle. Lenestro said, "He shall be returned to me once healed." Duiker said, "So you can do it all over again?" "Wrong. He'll not be returned to you." He then thought, "And if you and your comrades are outraged, wait till an hour from now." With a shrill tone, Lenestro said, "All such acts contrary to Malazan law are being noted. There shall be recompense, with interest." Duiker had heard enough. He closed the distance to grasp Lenestro's cloak collar with both hands and gave the man a teeth-rattling shake. The whip fell to the ground. Lenestro's eyes were wide with terror, reminding Duiker of the lapdog as it rode in the hound's mouth. Duiker whispered, "You probably think I'm about to tell you about the situation we're all in, but it's already quite evident that there'd be little point. You are a small-brained thug, Lenestro. Push me again, and I'll have you eating pig shit and liking it." He shook Lenestro again, then dropped him. Lenestro collapsed. Do you think this is the first time someone stood up to this guy in his entire life?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Completely shut down.
Oh, yeah.
Duiker frowned down at the man. List said, "He's fainted, sir." Duiker said, "So he has." He thought, "Old man scared you, did he?" Nethpara emerged from the crowd and asked, "Was that really necessary? As if our ongoing petition is not crowded enough. Now we have personal bullying to add to our grievances. Shame on you, historian." Personal bullying. These people have lost their minds.
They have. You know what's funny? I do the read and I also listen to it sometimes. And when Lister does Nethpara, he does it like James Mason. It's always, was that really necessary? As if ongoing petition is not crowded enough. I just love it. I think Coltane should use these people as arrow fodder and leave them here for the enemy to kill. I'm just really bloodthirsty tonight, huh? I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was working on my day off, I guess. I don't know.
And maybe they just bring that out in us.
They do. They do. They do. I mean, I was raised around people that had money, but it's like I never knew people this way, that were just like the people that you see. I think in America, I think of the New Englanders. I think of the Cape Cod people and a bunch of the politicians. You know? That's who I'm thinking of.
I have a vision of I mean, it's not really a specific person, but it's like the type of person that snaps for a waiter to come to them.
Yes. Absolutely.
The one that yells at a cashier because they picked up the wrong item and they're wrong, but they're sure that the price is something else, or a coupon's expired. They're yelling at the cashier. These type of people, you know?
Yes.
Ugh.
Yes.
Entitled mentality. Yes, exactly. We thought at the same time. Someone that's never had a real job in their life.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a week of that at work, and it hasn't been. It's not been bad for me. You know me; I turn it all away for the most part. But sometimes there's been some ones that I've been like, I've been real close. I've been real close to saying something to some people today. This week it's like, whoa, okay, I need
just
to
do the return, Billy.
This just. Oh, flashbacks on that one. You know, it's
sorry. Trigger warning. Liz said, "Excuse me, sir, but you might wish to know before you resume berating the historian that scholarship came late to this man. You will find his name among the noted on the First Army's column in Unta. And had you not just come late to this scene, you would have witnessed an old soldier's temper. Indeed, it was admirable restraint that the historian elected to use both hands to grip Lenestro's cloak, lest he use one to unsheathe that well-worn sword at his hip and drive it through the toad's heart." Nethpara blinked sweat from his eyes. Duerker slowly swung to face List. List noted the dismay in Duerker's face and answered it with a wink. He said, "We'd best move on, sir." They left behind a gathering in the clearing that broke its silence only after they'd entered the opposite aisle.
I just love List. Since he's been knocked out by the Wiccans, he's become an official Wiccan himself almost, and he's just become so cool. I love him.
Yeah, he's really growing up throughout this book.
Oh, yeah.
List walked alongside Duerker, leading his horse by the reins. He said, "It still astonishes me that they persist in the notion that we will survive this journey." Duerker glanced over in surprise. He asked, "Are you lacking such faith, then, Corporal?" List said, "We'll never reach Erin, historian, yet the fools compile their petitions, their grievances, against the very people keeping them alive." Duerker said, "There's great need to maintain the illusion of order, List, in us all." List's expression turned wry. He said, "I missed your moment of sympathy back there, sir." Duerker said, "Obviously." They left the noble's encampment and entered the mayhem of the wagons bearing wounded. Voices moaned a constant chorus of pain. A chill crept over Duerker. Even wheeled hospitals carried with them that pervasive atmosphere of fear, the sounds of defiance and the silence of surrender. Mortality's many comforting layers had been stripped away, revealing racked bones, a sudden comprehension of death that throbbed like an exposed nerve. Awareness and revelations thickened the prairie air in a manner priests could only dream of for their temples. Duerker thought, to fear the gods is to fear death. In places where men and women are dying, the gods no longer stand in the spaces in between. The soothing intercession is gone. They've stepped back through the gates, and watch from the other side. Watch and wait. List muttered, "We should have gone around." Duerker said, "Even without that man in need of your horse, I would have insisted we pass through this place, Corporal." List said, "I've learned this lesson already." Duerker said, "From your earlier words, I would suggest that the lesson you have learned is different from mine, lad." List asked, "This place encourages you, historian?" Duerker clarified, "Strengthens, Corporal, though in a cold way, I admit. Never mind the games of ascendance. This is what we are. The endless struggle laid bare. Gone is the idyllic, the deceit of self-import, as well as the false humility of insignificance. Even as we battle wholly personal battles, we are unified. This is the place of level earth, Corporal. That is its lesson. And I wonder if it is an accident that deluded mob in gold threads must walk in the wake of these wagons." List said, "Either way, few revelations have bled back to stain noble sentiments." Duerker said, "No? I smell desperation back there, Corporal." List spied a healer, and they delivered the servant into the woman's blood-smeared hands. It is an interesting concept that being that close to death is a great equalizer. Even though wealth or power can grant access to better healthcare resources, we're all going to have to face the end at some point.
Yeah, it's quite a sobering thought. Huh? We don't like to face it alone. It does. It makes you think about it sometimes.
Facing it alone, the way I look at it is, If you have a family around you, it's a little bit different. I mean, yeah, we go alone.
That's true. That's kind of what I mean.
But some people are truly alone because they didn't have a family and they didn't maintain good relationships with anybody.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody recently, and her job is to take care of, I think she's like the medical power of attorney for this lady that she works for. The lady has really bad relationships with her own daughters, and she's treating this lady that works for her like crap, just mean, nasty to everybody. Even her own friends don't want to have anything to do with her. And it's like, that's the type of person that I would envision going alone.
Yeah.
Just sour.
Yeah. Because nobody wants to be around them when they're alive, and they're going to be missed when they're gone. And that's a sad thing.
It is. Maintain your relationships.
Yes.
And sometimes that means you got to suck it up when you're wrong. That's a lot of times that's what it means.
That's what it is. It's a hard thing for people to do, but you're correct, sir.
The sun was low on the horizon by the time they reached the 7th's main camp. The faint smoke from the dung fires hung over the ordered rows of tents. Off to one side, 2 squads of infantry had set to in a contest of belt grip, using a leather-strapped skullcap for a ball. A ring of cheering, jeering onlookers had gathered. Laughter rang in the air. Duiker remembered the words of an old Marine from his soldiering days. Quote, "Sometimes you just have to grin and spit in Hood's face," end quote. I like that.
I do too. That's a good one.
The contesting squads were doing just that, running themselves ragged to sneer at their own exhaustion besides, and well aware that Tathanzi eyes watched from a distance. They were a day away from the river Pa'atha, and the impending battle was a promise that thickened the dusk. 2 of the 7th Marines flanked Coltane's command tent, and Duiker recognized one of them. She nodded and said, "Historian." There was a look in her eyes that seemed to lay an invisible hand against his chest, and Duiker was stilled to silence, though he managed a smile. As they passed between the drawn flaps, List murmured, "Well now, historian." Duiker said, "Enough of that, Corporal." It's probably good that I lost my voice right there.
Yep.
But he did not glance over to nail the young man's grin, as he was tempted to do. He thought, a man gets to an age where he's wise not to banter on desire with a comrade half his age. Too pathetic by far, that illusion of competition. Besides, that look of hers was likely more pitying than anything else, no matter what my heart whispered. Put an end to your foolish thoughts, old man. She must have been really impressed with his skill and bravery when he was guarding her during that raid.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that overtures were made during that raid from her to him.
She just said she'd come find him to practice sword fighting.
Oh, okay. He must have thought that she was joking then. I think she's serious.
He's just not valuing himself. He's had these sacred unguents or apothecary... What would you say? Age, preservation, tinctures.
Yeah, he's old, but she's drawn to him for some reason. He showed a lot of moxie, I'm assuming, during that raid, because he's a historian.
Well, I pictured her in her late 30s, if not 40, because they said that the 4 Marines that were involved in that raid were all over 30. And so I pictured somebody almost like Minala's age.
Yeah, she knows what she wants.
We were talking about how old he is. At least, so I said old, and Dujek, I pictured him 70, 80. Do you think, I guess, I mean, I'm thinking age difference.
It is, but I'm thinking that I'm thinking he's more like 60 or 70, kind of, maybe a little older than that. But at the same time, it's like, in a time like this where when all you've got left is your moment, and they're sitting there, and she can admire him for his skill as a swordsman while he's not even a swordsman. He's a historian. That gained him some respect from her. And if for real, that started something with her that he didn't, maybe not mean, but she does like him for some reason. It's probably because you got to cling to something that's this desperate of a situation that they're in.
I'd agree with that. Coltane stood near the center pole, his expression dark. Duiker and List's arrival had interrupted a conversation. Bolt and Captain Lull sat on saddle chairs, looking glum. Sormo stood wrapped in an antelope hide, his back to the tent's far wall, his eyes hooded in shadow. The air was sweltering and tense. Bolt cleared his throat and said, Sormo was explaining about the Semk godling. The spirits say something damaged it, badly. The night of the raid, a demon walked the land. Lightly, I gather, leaving a spore not easily sniffed out. In any case, it appeared, mauled the Semk, then left. It seems, historian, that the claw had company. Duiker asked, an imperial demon? Bolt shrugged and swung his flat gaze to Sormo. Sormo said, "There is precedent, yet Nil believes otherwise." Duerker asked, "Why?" There was a long pause before Sormo answered. He said, "When Nil fled into himself that night, no, that is, he believed that it was his own mind that sheltered him from the Sempk's sorceress attack. The Tano spirit walkers of this land are said to be able to quest through a hidden world, not a true warren, but a realm where souls are freed of flesh and bone. It seems that Nil stumbled into such a place, and there he came face to face with someone else. At first he thought it but an aspect of himself, a monstrous reflection." Duerker asked, "Monstrous?" Sormo said, "A boy of Nil's own age, yet with a demonic face. Nil believes it was bonded with the apparition that attacked the Semk. Imperial demons rarely possess human familiars." Duerker asked, "Then who sent it?" Sormo said, "Perhaps no one." Duerker thought, no wonder Coltane's had his black feathers ruffled. Question here. If Nil is traveling to this other realm that isn't necessarily a warren, and he's seeing the boy that's riding Apt, which is what they're talking about here.
Yes.
Is he going to the Warren of Shadow?
I'm not sure if that'd be the Warren of Shadow or if he's just, because they weren't in Shadow. They were just at that raid. Maybe he was just glimpsing what was going on while they were at, because that was during the raid, right? And Apt and I can't remember the kid's name, but they
haven't introduced a name for him yet.
They haven't named him yet. Yeah, okay. But when they came through, that was just kind of in the normal realm. He was there kind of saving them and helping them out. But I'm not sure. I wouldn't. I think that was just in their regular realm. I think he just saw them distantly. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how.
Yeah, because they came from the Imperial Warren and then came to the fight, and then I'm assuming they went back to the Imperial Warren.
That's because I think she's on the trail of Kalam, right? So she would go back to
She's on the trail of Lostara and Pearl.
Okay, who are on that track of Kalam. So
right. Well, actually, we don't have confirmation that they did go back to the Imperial Warren. So I'm assuming that Apt went back to the Imperial Warren to follow Lostariel and Pearl after that fight. So the Warren of Shadow doesn't have anything to do with this. I was just thinking, how is Nil seeing this kid?
He would just, we're just going to have to attribute that to this sort, to magic and his mind protecting him. And maybe he was kind of like outside of himself, like astrally a little bit, and could see what was going on at the battle a little bit.
Okay. And maybe the kid, when he got that eye, he can see things nobody else can see, do things nobody else can do.
It's true. Like reach for bits of the Simp God so he can mine. I love that. Love that. Oh, good gracious. That would be unsettling to see. It'd be unsettling and quite funny to see that brought to life.
Yeah. I wonder what would happen if he would have gotten a hold of it and eaten it. Ooh, nothing good.
I'd assume something bad would happen. Yeah. I was going to say, something bad, I'm assuming.
After a few minutes, Bolt sighed loudly. He said, "Chemist Rello has prepared a welcome for us on the other side of the river Patha. We cannot afford to go around him. Therefore, we shall go through him." Coltane addressed Duerker. "You ride with the Marines." Duerker glanced at Captain Lull, who grinned in return. He said, "Seems you've earned a place with the best, old man." Duerker said, "Hood's breath. I'll not last 5 minutes in a line of battle. My heart nearly gave out after a skirmish lasting all of 3 breaths the other night." Lull said, "We won't be frontline. There ain't enough of us left for that. If all goes as planned, we won't even get our swords nicked." Duerker said, "Oh, very well," then turned to Coltane. He said, "Returning the servants to the nobles was a mistake. It seems the nobleborn have concluded that you'll not take them away again if they're not fit to stand." Bolt said, "They showed spine, those servants, at Sakala Crossing. Just holding shields, mind, but hold is what they did." Coltane asked, "Uncle, do you still have that scroll demanding compensation?" Bolt said, "Aye." Coltane asked, "And that compensation was calculated based on the worth of each servant in coin?" Bolt nodded. Coltane said, "Collect the servants and pay for them in full, in gold jacatas." Bolt said, "Aye, though all that gold will burden the nobles sorely." Coltane said, "Better them than us." What a predicament for the nobles. Coltane. I want this gold, but it's going to weigh me down.
Yeah. Hey, there's an old story. It's just used for illustration purposes, but people talk about letting go of things, like people talk about a man drowning, holding onto a money belt full of gold. Drown with that gold rather than let it go. It's what these nobles would do.
It's like Benny in The Mummy, remember? Do you remember the first Mummy?
Oh,
With
yes,
Brendan Fraser?
yes,
He was so
yes,
greedy with all that treasure. That's what ended
yes.
up getting him.
Yeah, it's exactly what it
He
is.
could have gotten out.
Yeah, he could have gotten out.
Yeah.
I love this about Coltane here because this is a way to get some loyalty from these, because they respect these servants for standing up and helping them, even though they didn't have weapons. That's for Bolt to make that comment. They held, mind you, it was all they had was shield, but they held, and so that's saying something when for him to even notice it and acknowledge it. That means a lot from these Wiccan.
Acknowledging, yeah, that's great. Lull cleared his throat and asked, "That coin's the soldiers pay, ain't it?" Coltane growled, "The Empire honors its debts." It was a statement that promised to grow in resonance in the time to come, and the momentary silence in the tent told Duiker that he was not alone in that recognition. Is the implication of this last paragraph to mean that they will exact retribution on the armies of the apocalypse?
There could be something to that, but I'm just curious if it's just something to do with the fact that he just means that, honestly, that it's like this gold doesn't do us any good, and the Empress will make good what they owe us if we ever make it there to collect. It's kind of how I see that, but I think there's also some of that there that he could very well be looking to, knowing that the Empire would come looking for retribution. That's a very big possibility. I think it is.
Yeah, I think there's like a double meaning going on there.
Yeah, I think you're
sure.
right. I didn't think about it that way until you pointed it out. I think you're right.
Duiker sat beside the embers of a cooking fire. A nervous energy had driven him from his bedroll. On all sides, the camp slept. Even the animals had fallen silent. Risen swept through the warm air above the hearth, plucking hovering insects on the wing. The soft crunch of exoskeletons was a constant crackle. A dark shape appeared at Duiker's side, lowered itself into a squat, held silent. After a while, Duiker said, "A fist needs his rest." Coltane grunted. "And a historian?" Duiker said, "Never rests." Coltane said, "We are denied in our needs." Duiker said, "It was ever thus." I love that statement. It's such an eloquent way of saying it's always been this way.
Yeah, it's really a lovely way of saying that.
I think that sometimes in my head, because we've heard it before in these books, I think.
We have. And like Erikson just has a way with words, man. He really does. This really kind of lays you open sometimes, even with something so simple as that. I mean, it's just a simple statement that's really quite lovely. I'm like you. It's something I find quite lovely about the way it's stated like that. It's more encompassing than it's always been this way. Right. I think it's, for some reason, it's more encompassing. Like, yeah, it's always been this way. You know it. We know it. It says everything about it.
It's got more weight to it.
Yeah, it does.
Coltane said, "Historian, you joke like a Wiccan." Duiker said, "I've made a study of Bolt's lack of humor." Coltane said, "That much is patently clear." There was silence between them for a time. Duiker could make no claim to know the man at his side. If the fist was plagued by doubts, he did not show it, nor, of course, would he. A commander could not reveal his flaws. With Coltane, however, it was more than his rank dictating his recalcitrance. Even Bolt had occasion to mutter that his nephew was a man who isolated himself to levels far beyond the natural Wiccan stoicism. Coltane never made speeches to his troops. And while he was often seen by his soldiers, he did not make a point of it as many commanders did. Yet those soldiers belonged to him now, as if the fist could fill every silent space with a physical assurance as solid as a gripping of forearms. Duiker thought, what happens the day that faith is shattered? What if we are but hours from that day? Do you think there's an element of allowing the individuals to fill in the gaps on their own with this style of leadership by remaining remote? The soldiers who won't know what he's really like, they can assume the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. But he's also the thing that I think about Coltane a lot of times is he also recognizes talent as well, which is also what a good leader is supposed to be able to do. But I think you're right about the assuming the best, because you build him up in your mind and you assume the best. And also that's how you attain that kind of mythical status that helps drive that. I think it's what makes the troops want to follow him. So, they build that legend around him to give them something to hold on to, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, dude, think about it. I mean, he has kept them alive for how many months?
Yeah, they got to be going on 4 or 5 months now.
Yeah, running through this, what I'm assuming is a very desertish type of place, and hostile at best place. And he's kept these people alive. You're like, dadgum. Wow. I mean, he's earned the legendary status for sure.
Definitely. Coltane said, the enemy hunts our scouts. We cannot see what has been prepared for us in the valley ahead. Duiker asked, Sormo's allies? Coltane said, the spirits are preoccupied. Duiker thought, the Semk godling. Coltane said, Can Eld, Dibral, Tithen, Semk, Tipasi, Halafan, Ubari, Hisari, Sialk, and Guren. Duiker thought 4 tribes now, 6 city legions. Am I hearing doubt? Coltane spat into the embers, then said, the army that awaits us is one of 2 holding the south. Duiker thought, how in Hood's name does he know this? He asked, has Shaik marched out of Araku then? Coltane said, she has not. A mistake. Duiker asked, what holds her back? Has the rebellion been crushed in the north? Coltane said, crushed? No, it commands all. As for Shaik, Coltane paused to adjust his crow feather cape, then went on. Perhaps her visions have taken her into the future. Perhaps she knows the whirlwind shall fail, that even now the adjunct to the Empress assembles her legions. Unta's harbor is solid with transports. The whirlwind's successes will prove but momentary. A first blood rush that succeeded only because of imperial weakness. Shaik knows the dragon has been stirred awake, and moves ponderously still. Yet when the full fury comes, it shall scour this land from shore to shore. That sounds a lot like America in World War II, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much.
The sleeping giant awakes.
Yes, once they got hit hard enough, that woke them up.
Yeah. Duiker asked, this other army, here in the south, how far away? Coltane straightened and said, I intend to arrive at Vathar 2 days before it. Duiker thought, word must have reached him that Ubarid has fallen, along with Devral and Asmar. Vathar, the third and last river. If we make Vathar, it's a straight run south to Erin, through the most forbidding wasteland on this hood-cursed continent. He said, Fist, the river Vathar is still months away. What of tomorrow? Coltane pulled his gaze from the embers and blinked at Duiker. He said, tomorrow we crushed Chemist Rello's army, of course. One must think far ahead to succeed, historian. You should understand that. The Fist strolled away. Duiker stared at the dying fire, a sour taste in his mouth. He thought, that taste is fear, old man. You've not got Coltane's impenetrable armor. You cannot see past a few hours from now, and you await the dawn in the belief that it shall be your last, and therefore you must witness it. Coltane expects the impossible. He expects us to share in his implacable confidence, to share in his madness. Duiker straightened. The sounds of activity had risen in the Wiccan encampments. He made his way toward the nearest one. The horse warriors of the foolish dog clan had gathered to ready their equipment beneath the glare of torch poles. Duiker strode closer. Ornate boiled leather armor had appeared, dyed in deep and muddy shades of red and green. The thick, padded gear was in a style Duiker had never seen before. Wiccan runes had been burned into it. The armor looked ancient, yet never used. Duiker approached the nearest warrior, a peach-faced youth busy rubbing grease into a horse's brow guard. Duiker said, heavy armor for a Wiccan, and for a Wiccan horse as well. The young man nodded soberly, said nothing. Duiker said, you're turning yourselves into heavy cavalry. The lad shrugged. An older warrior nearby spoke up. The war leader devised these during the rebellion, then agreed peace with the emperor before they could be used. Duiker asked, and you have been carrying them around with you all this time? The veteran said, aye. Duiker asked, why didn't you use this armor at Sakala Crossing? The veteran said, didn't need to. Duiker asked, and now? The veteran raised an iron helm with new bridge and cheek guards attached and grinned. He said, Rello's horde hasn't faced heavy cavalry yet, has it? Duiker thought, thick armor doesn't make heavy cavalry. Have you fools ever trained for this? Can you gallop in an even line? Can you wheel? How soon before your horses are winded beneath all that extra weight? I can't believe he doubts their skill on a horse. Of course they've trained for this.
Dude, that's just the stress talking, man.
Yeah. At the beginning of the book, didn't they do some type of crazy formation at the docks?
Yes. They pulled up and scared. That's what first got everyone's attention, because the crazy one that was yelling the most was Coltane.
Yes. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they just snap up in formation and shut up just like that, and they march off exquisitely. It's like, wow, these guys are awesome. Of course, I'm like you. It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm thinking of Walter Sobchak from the Lebowski. It's like, dude, that's just the stress talking, man.
Duiker said, you'll look intimidating enough. The veteran caught the skepticism and his grin broadened. The youth set down the brow guard and began strapping on a sword belt. He slid the blade from the scabbard, revealing 4 feet of blackened iron, its tip rounded and blunt. The weapon looked heavy, oversized in the lad's hands. Duerker thought, Hood's breath. One swing will yank him from his saddle. The veteran grunted. In Malazan, he said, Limber up there, Timul. Timul immediately launched into a complex choreography, the blade blurring in his hand. Duerker asked, Do you intend to dismount once you reach the enemy? The veteran said, Sleep would have done much for your mind's cast, old man. That's a nice way to say, don't be an idiot.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Duerker thought, point taken, bastard. He wandered away. He'd always hated the hours before a battle. None of the rituals of preparation had ever worked for him. A check of weapons and gear rarely took an experienced soldier more than 20 heartbeats. Duerker had never been able to repeat the check mindlessly, again and again, as did so many soldiers. Keeping the hands busy while the mind slowly slid into a sharp-edged world of saturated colors, painful clarity, and a kind of lustful hunger that seized body and soul. He thought, some warriors ready themselves to live, some ready themselves to die, and in these hours before the fate unfolds, is damned hard to tell one from the other. The lad Timul's dance a moment ago might be his last. That damned sword may never again leap from its sheath and sing on the end of his hand. The sky was lightening in the east, the cool wind beginning to warm. The sky overhead was cloudless. The Wiccan camp behind him, Duerker entered the regimental rows of tents that marked the 7th. The various elements maintained their cohesion in the encampment's layout, and each was clearly identifiable to him. The medium infantry, who formed the bulk of the army, were arranged by company, each company consisting of cohorts that were in turn made up of squads. They would go into battle with full-body shields of bronze, pikes, and short swords. They wore bronze-scale hauberks, greaves, and gauntlets, and bronze helmets reinforced with iron bars wrapped in a cage around the skull cap. Chain camels protected their necks and shoulders. The other footmen consisted of Marines and sappers, the former a combination of heavy infantry and shock troops, the old emperor's invention and still unique to the empire. It's interesting that no one has learned to replicate this yet.
Yeah, I don't know why this idea of the heavy infantry and shock troops is a really good idea. And why has no one else, did he tell somebody about it? I'm just like, why don't these other people use it? That's a brilliant idea.
It's been long enough that they have been attacking other places that you would think, well, maybe the only places they engaged with are the places they already conquered. So maybe they don't really have any enemies left that have seen the use of these. They've all been subjugated.
Yeah, that could be it. I guess it's good for your enemy not to know that you have this unusual type of troop, but I don't know why you wouldn't want to have more of them if they're so effective.
Well, they're effective in their use, but you don't want to make up your whole army of them, because the bulk of the army was those heavy infantry with the full body shields and the pikes and all that, almost like a Roman legion.
That's what I was thinking too. They got that big beetle thing where they can make the big shield wall.
The phalanx.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing.
The Marines were armed with crossbows and short swords as well as long swords. They wore blackened chain beneath gray leathers. Every third soldier carried a large, round shield of thick, soft wood that would be soaked for an hour before battle. These shields were used to catch and hold enemy weapons ranging from swords to flails. They would be discarded after the first few minutes of a fight, usually studded with an appalling array of edged and spiked iron. This peculiar tactic of the 7th had proved effective against the Semk and their undisciplined, two-handed fighting methods. The Marines called it pulling teeth. The sappers' encampment was set somewhat apart from the others, as far away as possible when they carried Moranth munitions.
I can't blame them.
Yeah.
This stuff seems to be a little more volatile than dynamite. And
yes, just a little bit.
Yeah. It's like, well, if it goes up, man, it's taking a lot of folks with it.
Yeah. Though he looked, Duerker could not see its location, but he knew well what he'd find. He thought, look for the most disordered collection of tents and foul-smelling vapors aswarm with mosquitoes and gnats, and you'll have found Malazan engineers. And in that quarter, you'll find soldiers shaking like leaves, with splash-burn pockmarks, singed hair, and a dark, manic gleam in their eyes.
Doesn't look too positively on these fellows, does he?
Oh, man. Yeah. It's like a walking postcard of PTSD.
Yes. Yes.
It's crazy.
Oh, good gracious. What's that movie with Jeremy Renner as the Hurt Locker?
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like those guys, you know?
It's very much like that, probably.
Yeah, yeah. craziness.
It's a good description. Corporal List stood with Captain Lull at one end of the Marine encampment, close to the attachment of loyal Hisari guards whose soldiers were readying their tulwars and round shields in grim silence. Coltane held them in absolute trust, and the Seven Cities natives had proved themselves again and again with fanatic ferocity, as if they had assumed a burden of shame and guilt and could only relieve it by slaughtering every one of their traitorous kin. Captain Lull smiled as Duerker joined them. He said, "Got a cloth for your face? We'll be eating dust today, old man, in plenty." List said, "We'll be at the back end of the wedge, sir." He looked none too pleased. Duerker said, "I'd rather swallow dust than a yard of cold iron. Do we know what we're facing yet, Lull?" Lull said, "That's captain to you." Duerker said, "As soon as you stop calling me old man, I'll start calling you by your rank." Lull said, "I was jesting, Duerker. Call me what you like, and that includes pig-headed bastard if it pleases you." Duerker said, "It just might." Lull's face twisted sourly, and he asked, "Didn't get any sleep, did you?" He swung to List and said, "If the old codger starts nodding off, you've my permission to give him a clout on that bashed-up helmet of his, Corporal." List said, "If I can stay awake myself, sir. This good cheer is wearing me out." Lull grimaced at Duerker and said, "The lad's showing spark these days." Duerker said, "Isn't he just?" I had this whole exchange here highlighted. This is one of those conversations that I highlight when I come across them because I just love them.
They're great, man.
This is the kind of stuff that really brings the Marines alive to me.
It adds such a depth that you don't capture and from other writers. Just the casualness of reality. This is a very real, very lived-in place. And I was going to bring up a point here that I love that comment that he says about better eating the dust than eating the yard of iron.
Yes,
yard
that's
of
good
cold iron.
Yeah.
Do you know, this is out of the blue, do you know where the expression "the whole 9 yards" came from?
No.
You know when they empty those 50 cal machine guns in World War II? Those things are 9 yards long.
Oh, wow.
Belts are 9 yards. So when you gave them they gave them the whole 9 yards is where that comes from.
That's crazy.
Isn't that kind of a cool yard of iron? Kind of reminded me of that for some reason. I thought that was kind of appropriate.
Man, that's cool knowledge.
It is. I love that kind of knowledge. We dropped a little World War II earlier here talking about America, so it's like, oh, it's totally on topic.
So that's a soldier saying from World War II. Wow.
Yes.
The sun was burning clear of the horizon. Duerker glanced down at his boots. The morning dew had seeped through the worn leather. Strands of snagged spiderwebs made a stretched, glittering pattern over the toes. He found it unaccountably beautiful and thought, gossamer webs, intricate traps. Yet it was my thoughtless passage that left the night's work undone. Will the spiders go hungry this day because of it? Lull said, "Shouldn't dwell on what's to come." Duerker smiled and looked up at the sky. He asked, "What's the order?" Lull said, "The 7th Marines are the spear point. Crow riders to either side are the flanking barbs. Foolish dog, now a tog thundering heavy cavalry, are the weight behind the Marines. Then come the wounded, protected on all sides by the 7th Infantry. Taking up the tail are the Hisari Loyals and the 7th Cavalry." Duerker was slow to react. Then he blinked and faced Lull. Lull nodded and said, "The refugees and herds are being held back, this side of the valley but slightly south, on a low shelf of land that the maps call the Shallows, with a ridge of hills south of that. The Weasel clan guards them. It's the safest thing to do. That clan's turned dark and nasty since Sakala. Their horse warriors have all filed their teeth, if you can believe that." Something about filed teeth always freaks me out.
Yeah. How painful is it to file your teeth? I imagine it's not a fun thing to do. But no,
I don't know if they stay away from the nerve. I don't know if it is painful.
Okay. It might not be, but I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just, but what happens if you bite your cheek or lip or
Yes,
tongue?
that's exactly what I was going to say. Imagine the
paddling.
catastrophe of biting your lip with that or your tongue. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you bite chunks of yourself off.
Yeah. And it's going to happen.
Oh yeah. You know that in the history of people with filed teeth, yes, people, dude, okay. I have a tongue being bitten off story. It's not about me. It's about a very famous person. I won't tell you who it is until we're done because it makes the story better. A young man playing basketball got elbowed or something, fell down, bit the tip of his tongue off, and turned out to be a very famous singer. Swallowed that tip of the tongue too, so there's nothing he could do about it. Mm-hmm. That's Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger did that.
Really? Wow.
Yes, and that's with regular teeth. So imagine those filed teeth. Ugh.
Man,
it gives me the willies, man.
Yeah. And when I was in middle school, we had a coach for PE that had about half of his tongue missing.
Oh, okay.
And he kind of reminded me of the coach that you couldn't understand in Waterboy.
Okay.
I know I'm not making fun of people that have half their tongue. Okay, I'm just making it was that type of experience where you're not exactly sure what he's saying sometimes. All right, let's move along here.
Move along, please.
Duerker said, "We go to this battle unencumbered." Lowell said, "Accepting the wounded, aye." Captain Solmar and Chenid emerged from the infantry encampment. Solmar's posture and expression radiated outrage. Chenid's was mocking, if slightly bemused. Solmar hissed, "Blood and guts! Those damn sappers and their hood-spawned captain have done it this time." Chenid met Duerker's gaze and shook his head. He said Coltane went white at the news. Duerker asked, "What news?" Solmar snarled, "The sappers lit out last night. Hood rot the cowards one and all. Polyol blessed them with pestilence, pox their illegitimate brood with her pus-soaked kiss. Tog trampled that captain's ball." Chenid was laughing in disbelief. He said, "Captain Solmar, what would your friends in the council say to such foul-mouthed cursing?" And what beautiful cursing it was, too. Yes. Very creative.
Exceptionally creative. I'm going to have to say, yes, thank you for that. We needed that. Education and some Malazan swearing. Thank you.
Yeah. Solmar said, "Burn take you too, Chenid. I'm a soldier first, damn you. A trickle to a flood. That's what we're facing." Lull said, "There won't be any desertions. The sappers ain't run away. They're up to something, I'd hazard. It's not easy reining in that unwashed, motley company when you can't even track down his captain. But I don't imagine Coltane will make the same mistake again."
You know, these sappers, it's a shame that we don't really get to know too many of these sappers, because this is obviously a really wild bunch here. We just always see the results that they produce, but we don't get to know these madmen. The only sappers that we really get to know are the bridge burners. And so I'm assuming they're all just as crazy. It's part of the game, I'm assuming, with these being a sapper.
We do get to know some other sappers that are not bridge burners.
That are quite good.
But yeah, we really only get to, I would say, like maybe 6 in total. We get to learn their personalities, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But what personalities they are.
Oh, bigger than life. Each one of them is bigger than life, man.
Yeah, some of the best characters.
You know, I'll have a Gardens of the Moon flashback here to where Perrin first meets Picker. You know, just those kind of just casual meetings of those people that they're such large personalities. Like, oh my word, that's Picker that early, and you're like, wow, there are some funny ones. There are some funny ones, dude.
Solmar muttered, "He'll not have the chance. The first worms will crawl into our ears before the day's done. It's the oblivious feast for us all, mark my words." Lull raised his brows. He said, "If that's as encouraging as you can manage, Solmar, I pity your soldiers." Solmar said, "Pity's for the victors, Lull." A lone horn wailed its mournful note. Chenid said, "Waiting's over. Save me a patch of grass when you go down, gentlemen." Duerker watched the 2 7th captains depart. He'd not heard that particular send-off in a long time. Lull said, "Chenid's father was in Dassim's first sword."
Dassim Moldor.
Or so goes the rumor, even when the names are swept from official histories. The past shows its face, old man? Duerker was in no mood to rise to either jibe. He said, "Think I'll check my gear," and turned away.
I don't know why, but I like that comment. Save me a patch of grass when you go down, gentlemen. I don't know why.
It's another one of those really good sayings that he writes.
It is. It's just a great saying, dude. It's a great soldier saying. It's poignant and sad.
How do you come up with something like that?
I don't know, dude. I got no idea. I guess we just need to grill him when we talk to Mr. Erikson about what war movies he's watched. It's like, what are you into, man? Like war movies. I need to know what you're into so I can watch everything you've watched and read what you've read just so I can see what you're into, man. Because I guarantee there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, but even then, this is original. How do you?
Oh, it is. It's how does it? He has just distilled the essence of the soldier. I'd almost like to see him write regular soldiers from the real world, some real event. I bet he'd write beautiful war fiction.
I've been listening to Quentin Tarantino talk about the characters he writes, and he gets real in depth. He was talking about how he convinced Robert De Niro to be in Jackie Brown. The conversation turned to, what kind of shoes the character would wear. And Quentin Tarantino had this whole story about how the guy went to jail and the shoes that he's wearing are the same shoes that he had when he went to jail. And when they packed them in the bag, all the stuff was packed on top of it. So one of the shoes has the toe crumpled in because it crushed it when everything was packed on top of it, and it sat there for years while the guy was in jail.
Wow.
The reason I bring this up is I wonder if Mr. Erikson gets this far into his characters when he thinks about how they're going to behave.
It's a good question. I would almost have to say he does, because I mean, his characters aren't just, a lot of, when we talk about like writers for movies, and Tarantino aside, but a lot of writers, sometimes they write people real thin. Talk about they're just a surface character. There's not much to them. They don't care about a backstory. They leave that to the actor to think about and come up with or something.
Yeah.
And I don't get that or care. That's just too much for me. But but Erikson, obviously, he thinks this stuff. I mean, he's got to, because there's so much. I feel like even those, we've had two throwaway sayings basically in this episode that are very poignant. The same piece of ground, and what was the other one? Thus it ever was.
It was ever thus.
It was ever thus. I mean, those are just. It's like he's channeling some ancient man. I don't know. He's not much older than me. I think he's probably my age. And it's like I feel like he's channeling the ancients for some reason. I'm like, I don't know how he does it, but man.
Because he's an anthropologist. Maybe he studied
That's what it is.
The old ways.
That's it. The old ways.
The old ways.
Yes, I like that. I'll take you that and just say yes. There it is. I will take that answer, sir. That is acceptable.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna stop there. Super excited for next week, because I've been dreaming about covering this next part of the book since we began this podcast.
Yeah. Agreed. I agree too. I feel the same.
I have a lot to say about this next section. It's had that much of an impact on me.
Yeah, this is some good stuff.
For standout moments for this section, the Wiccan cattle dog making off with the Hengese roach dog.
What a great start to a chapter. What a brilliant start to a chapter. Before it gets too heavy, it's like, here's this great little intro to two dogs.
Yeah. And you don't know what's going to happen to this thing.
No.
It's probably eaten.
I'm assuming we ate it raw.
Yeah. I enjoyed Duiker throttling Lenestro. Well, that's the well-deserved violence that I was referring to.
I always like seeing the aristocrats get it.
The non-deserved violence was the whipping.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I always like seeing the aristocrats or those kind of folks, the entitled getting it and whatever. I always enjoy seeing them get their comeuppance. It's always fun.
It's karma.
It is.
I really enjoyed the female veteran throwing eyes at Duiker and List noticing, then commenting on it.
Got to keep your eye on that gal. I like that too, though. I have really I mentioned it earlier, how much I've really enjoyed List. Him and Duiker's back and forth, and how List is actually, at sometimes, the more mature of the two in some of his behaviors. And Duiker's such a down and out guy because he's old, he's tired, and he's apparently not sleeping. So crotchety. He's kind of he's crotchety, dude. He's very crotchety. He's got some sleep.
Coltane speaking with Duiker at the campfire.
I had completely forgot about that little aside with those two.
Mm-hmm. That's the first time something like that happened, right?
Yeah. It's not something that I even expected. Even though I've read this, I forgot it. And it's just like, oh, that's so cool that he kind of just came out there and just was hanging out with Duiker a little bit just by the fire. And it's like, wow, that's kind of cool. Really good stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's, it's insight to Coltane. It wasn't any insight to Coltane at all, actually, but it was some dialogue with Coltane that we always love because we love Coltane.
Yeah, he's always so quiet. He's very terse with his statements, almost like a Spartan.
Yes.
The laconic speech. You familiar with that? The way they used to talk?
Yeah.
Finding out that the Emperor made up his Marines with a combination of heavy infantry and shock troops. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting find there. I agree.
The sapper tents being set up as far from the rest of the tents as possible. And then the additional detail of them being disorderly and then stinky and mosquitoes all over the place.
Always shaky.
Uh-huh.
It was they're shaking with acid burns all over them.
Yeah.
But I do understand the necessity. But man, I want to meet the captain.
Captain Lull messing with Duiker, and then Duiker not having any of it. He wasn't willing to play.
I love that.
Yeah.
Come on, Duiker, lighten up, buddy.
Yeah.
Hey, lighten up, buddy.
What's the worst that's going to happen? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. What are you going to do, die? Come on.
And then the apparent disappearance of the snappers.
Yeah.
I wonder what they're up to.
You know, at the crossing at the Vathar, they pulled out some big surprises there.
They did.
I'm hoping they do so. Yeah, so I'm hoping it's going to be something big.
And then finally, finding out that Chenned's father was in Dassim's first sword.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is very cool.
If you ever want to know more about Dassim's first sword, there's a lot of information about that in A Knight of Knives.
Okay. I'll need to reread that one because I've read that.
Yeah, because that's where those 4 characters are introduced.
Yeah. And that's what really got me is I need to go back and do that because that was the one that I was out of Elsomont's books and I was kind of disappointed to start in. And at first I'm like, you know what? Once I started giving everything else a chance, I'm like, I need to come back with a more open mind because I have enjoyed everything else Elsamont has written. So I need to read this with fresh eyes.
All right. You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
Just great episode, man. Just fantastic episode.
Yeah, great job tonight.
Yeah, good job, buddy.
Thanks. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yep, see y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.